Verge 2 heard you liked Metroid, so it put Metroid in your Metroid so you can blast baddies and hunt for hidden goodies across 2 sprawling 2D maps at the same time. Granted, opening a game review with an exhibit reference in 2021 might be a bit outdated, but Axiom Verge 2 is anything but. It infuses its retro-inspired sequel with contemporary ideas, like fast travel and an optional approach to the bulk of its boss fights, in order to make progression smoother for players of all skill levels. However, this focus on accessibility comes at a cost, resulting in a Metroidvania that's consistently rewarding to explore, but noticeably lacking in combat challenge and diversity. Axiom Verge 2's story is fleshed out by countless hidden notes and computer terminal messages, but I won't even attempt to summarize it since it's dense with the same sort of pseudo-scientific technobabble that pervades its 2015 predecessor. Lingo-heavy lore aside, I found the basic plight of its main character, Indra, more than enough to propel me through the roughly 8-hour adventure. After she arrives at an Antarctic research base looking for her missing daughter, one thing leads to another and she suddenly has the power to absorb the unique abilities of nanomachines known as arms. That's really all the setup and motivation I needed. Axiom Verge 2 may feature an entirely new lead character and setting, but what really sets it apart from the original game is the ability to phase in and out of the breach. An alternate dimension running parallel with the main overworld. Sort of like Stranger Things is upside down if it was being emulated on a Game Boy Color. Each side of the dimensional divide has its own unique map structure and feel, but this contrast doesn't just make for appealing shifts in aesthetics, it brings a literal extra dimension to navigating your way through Axiom Verge 2. Not only do you need to puzzle your way to unlock gates and uncover hidden power-ups within each separate world, but you also use interdimensional tears to hop back and forth between realms to circumnavigate obstacles in one dimension by finding an alternate path in the other. Orienting yourself in 2 places at once inspires a degree of non-linear navigation that's a consistently absorbing challenge as a result. It's also a mechanic that continues to evolve over the course of the journey. Initially, you can only shift from one world to the other at predetermined breach gates on each map, but eventually Indra is given the ability to reveal hidden tears and manipulate their placement in order to cross over to more precise areas. Not being able to see exactly where you're going does introduce some trial and error, but the ability to fast travel to any previously discovered save point gave me the freedom to experiment with blind leaps between worlds, knowing that I could beam back for a do-over if I accidentally blinked into the wrong spot. However, compared to its clever dual-world exploration, Axiom Verge 2's combat is fairly one-dimensional. There's certainly a healthy variety of enemy types to contend with in both maps, but the arsenal you're given to tackle them with is surprisingly conservative compared to that of the original game. Indra begins with a pickaxe for close-up attacks and a boomerang for ranged assaults, while her drone, which she must pilot remotely through the breach zones, can swing a tethered spinning blade and use a grappling hook to launch itself at enemies like a pinball. But despite the handful of additional melee weapons to find and the inclusion of a skill tree to upgrade basic attributes, my simple slash 'em up method for fighting didn't ever change, because it didn't need to. I never stopped to ponder which weapon I should use, because the right tool for the job always seemed to just be whatever I happened to have equipped at that moment. Axiom Verge 2 attempts to inject some strategy into fights by giving Indra the ability to hack enemies and other objects, but I found this feature much more useful for passive jobs, like triggering switches or hijacking moving platforms, than I did for any meaningful combat gains. I basically just smashed my way through roomfuls of robotic hordes, which did provide some visceral thrills, but I wish I'd felt as inspired to cave in heads as I was figuring out ways to head into caves. Boss fights are similarly straightforward should you choose to take them on. Unlike most Metroidvanias, you can actually just skip almost every boss in Axiom Verge 2 entirely and continue on your way to your next story objective, which will likely be a welcome feature for people who tend to bounce off these kinds of games when the going gets tough. If, however, you enjoy the tension and eventual dopamine hit of toppling a towering behemoth, then you'll likely be disappointed by Axiom Verge 2's boss battles. Take this raging bull from Axiom Verge 2's midpoint. Look at the size of him. Surely I'll have to identify a weak point, maybe analyze his movements to look for an opening in order to strike. Of course, I'll need to make sure I have the right weapon equipped for maximum effectiveness, maybe use some of Indra's special abilities, and oh wait, He's already dead. Granted, you can tweak the enemy damage multipliers in the pause menu, but this just makes the combat more attritional without making it any more dynamic. I went into Axiom Verge 2 hoping for the next Hollow Knight, but what I got instead was a series of hollow victories. Axiom Verge 2 is a dual-dimensional Metroidvania that's genuinely engaging to explore. Phasing in and out of the breach to unlock new paths through the overworld and vice versa presented me with consistently stimulating environmental puzzles to solve, a process that evolved in surprising ways over the course of the campaign. However, the same sense of accomplishment can't be derived from the simplistic combat and uninspired boss fights. Ultimately, Axiom Verge 2 is a sequel that largely delights thanks to its dual-world design, but I wish the developer could have polished it without having to file the difficulty spikes all the way down. For more IGN reviews, check out our verdicts on Tribes of Midgard and Crowfall, and for everything else, stick with IGN.